is Media Week.
Hello and welcome to Media Week. I'm Brooke Cordy. Ahead, the battle between free-to-air broadcasters and Foxtel over anti-siphoning. A new global media agency network opens in Australia, and we get the ad market outlook from our special guest, Ian Jacobs from Starcom Mediavest. But first, the world's biggest English language newspaper website, the Daily Mail, is launching an Australian edition of its site in a joint venture with Nine's digital arm and MI9. DailyMail.com.au will launch early in the new year, executives promising there will be no paywall.
We already have a sizable Australian audience. Australia is a big market for both for readers and advertisers. Our whole strategy is to make ourselves a global news brand, and certainly in the English-speaking world.
Well, my co-host James Manning, editor and publisher of Media Week, is here. James, it's a big announcement just before the Nine IPO, it should be pointed out as well. The Mail Online publisher was only on the show a couple of months ago. Was there any hints back then that we'd see this?
Not really. I mean, one of our questions was, look, you're here in Australia, what are you doing here? Do you want to start up here? He said, look, it's not a priority. We're going to be talking to some potential partners. He didn't call them that, but he said, speak to some people here. Those talks are obviously pretty fruitful.
Apparently.
We asked him, you know, they already, as he said, they already had a substantial audience here. He was really concerned about trying to monetise that audience here. So we thought, well, maybe, you know, get some sales people, and that's probably why MI9 were chosen. You know, their sales prowess. They'll be able to monetise that existing audience pretty much immediately, you'd think, and then work on building a bigger, you know, Australian audience with more Australian content.
I think we can probably talk about this a little bit more coming up, but I guess when you look at the pressure that online then places back on print, you've seen some try to respond to that. This week we've seen the largest ever print edition of BRW magazine. Is bigger better? Is that what the idea is?
What's the last issue too? That's the
biggest one.
Final one, yeah. So, yeah, it's a real turning point, if you like. It's been one of the last sort of weekly news magazines out there. The Bulletin's gone, you know. Time magazine's just a regional edition now. So BRW, you know, was a real holdout, but they're just going online now. So that's their future, and they're, you know, it's a collector's item, if you like, that last print edition.
Yep, every single page. Now, Neil Breen departing from the Today Show after, well, what seems to have been a pretty rocky time. I mean, what exactly happened?
Well, there was just some friction amongst that breakfast staff, and as you'd noticed, you know, breakfast TV's been a hotspot this year. There's been changes at 7. There's the 10 launch, which hasn't gone so well, and it's created a whole lot of content for the newspapers. Channel 9 wanted to avoid all that before the IPO, of course. They've been able to avoid that. They've moving Neil out. He's going into 9 News. He's going to work in the sports department. He's got a long history as a sports journalist and editor, so we should do well there.
James, you've been busy the last couple of weeks with all the upfront events for TV. You've done 2 more this week, the final ones for the TV networks. 9, probably one of the most important ones for advertisers and investors. What are we finding out about what Nine's really spending and when it comes to content for next year?
It's more of the same, really. They're investing heavily in key big-ticket drama. So Love Child, you might have seen some ads for that series set in the 60s up in King's Cross. Looks pretty good. Fat Tony and Co., which is sort of a take on the first season of Underbelly. More of House Husbands. Gina Reinhardt tally movie. And Chappelle Corby, also a tele movie. Then some of their big successful reality franchises like The Voice, going to be 2 series this year, the regular Voice with Kylie Minogue added to the judging panel, which should give it a bit of clout, and Voice Kids, and there'll be 2 series of The Block.
Okay, you're also at the ABC up front. I mean, do advertisers and investors care as much what ABC TV really gets up to?
Not as much, but it's important to watch what they do because, look, they compete for audience. They compete, you know, they take away audience. They beat 10 this year in the ratings for all people. They, you know, compete for programming talent. They compete for programs. So, yeah, it's important to watch how they go because it certainly has an impact on those listed players.
Right. Well, also this week we've seen the Foxtel CEO Richard Freudenstein calling for a review of the anti-siphoning regime, saying the size of the list should be reduced. The list protects live broadcasts of certain major sporting events on free-to-air TV.
Well, we're not saying that there should be no anti-siphoning laws. We're not saying that there shouldn't be any sport on free-to-air television. We're saying come up with a shorter list, come up with a sensible list of things that people actually care about. At the moment, the list contains something like 1,100 events. It still contains a lot of overseas sporting events that, I mean, Australians wouldn't even know it's on the list. They wouldn't care about it. So come up with a much shorter list and then come up with a regime that allows people to go out and buy those rights, even if some free-to-air rights are left for the free-to-airs to buy. So there'll be much more sport shown on television. There'll be more money going into the sporting codes, which I genuinely believe is really important in terms of not only encouraging elite sport, but encouraging grassroots sport and more people to play sport. And a simpler regime would make that much more possible.
So James Manning still with me, obviously upping the ante, the couple of other issues that obviously they're still arguing about as well.
Yeah, it's good to see him going head-to-head with Harold Mitchell. Harold Mitchell now, of course, the chairman of the Free TV. He sat in here a lot of times saying, look, Foxtel isn't doing a bad job. Well, it's something we won't hear him say for a while now.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Let's go to, quickly on television, the ratings end Saturday night this weekend. 10 hasn't had a good year, we know that. What about 7 and 9? Who's actually won?
Look, it's a bit of argy-bargy. 7's number 1 all people, 9's number 1 in the key demographics. Between them, they control about 80% of the ad spend. So look, it's just been greedy for them, fighting over, you know, those few little points, but they've both had a pretty good year.
A few crumbs. Quick one to finish off this chat as well. Big news this week, Katie Couric goes to Yahoo. Now, she's going to be a global anchor. I've seen different analysts say, one, it was a bad bet, or completely awkward misstep, I saw someone else say. The other half of the people say landmark deal, you know, end of the old media dominance as we know it. Do you think it's either of those?
That's neither, no, but it's part of a, you know, Yahoo's making a big play for upping their content, you know, to get back in the game, get back on the radar. There's a lot of people they're hiring. Katie's probably the biggest name so far, but there'll be plenty of others, you know. They won't be putting all their eggs in that basket.
Yeah. Let's go to the ratings locally. James, you can whip through these pages for us. This is the week 47 of TV ratings. So let's
second last week of survey, yeah, Dancing with the Stars, The Bachelor. The Bachelor, first time it got into the top 10, was the final episode. And it finally came good for 10. They're going to do it again next year.
And 9 News did pretty well in the second half of those
and
pages.
it's a lot of news there. You see the weekend news bulletins always do very well in that top 10. Then on to the subscription TV. Football again, Australia playing Costa Rica. Lead-up matches to the World Cup. Grand Design's doing again. You know, it's a usual suspect in that list.
And a bit more sport on the second page.
Yeah, Paddock to plate, but Matt Moran's here is still doing very well for Lifestyle.
Fantastic. We'll take a quick break here on Media Week. Coming up, forecast on the ad market outlook for 2014. Our special guest, Ian Jacobs from Starcom Mediavest next.